Hi, and welcome back to Multiplicity Crafts. Today I'm going to be going over 10 more ideas for your paper scraps. And the reason I say more is because I did a previous video with 10 ideas. So if you want even more ideas on top of this one, I will have that linked for you in the description box. Now I'll try to keep this introduction brief, but I want to let you know that this is part of a hop where you can find other videos down in my description box that will give you some stash busting ideas to use up your stash. Now my idea is to use up your stash of paper scraps. So let's go ahead and get started. Begin by placing the papers in a V shape. And at this point you can go ahead and glue the two papers together. Now I did not glue mine together just for the sake of time, but you can go ahead and glue yours. And what you're doing is folding one paper over the other. So like the green one folds over and then rotate, and then the red one folds over and rotate, and so on. You'll continue this pattern until the paper mechanism that's going to go inside of our card is complete. Now I have these strips of paper measured at roughly 8 inches long by about a ½ inch thick, but you probably don't need them quite 8 inches long. I would say maybe 5 inches or less would be sufficient for the inside of a card. And you might remember this paper poinsettia from my previous tutorial, so we're going to be popping that up on our paper mechanism we just made, and that's what's going to create our springy Christmas card. So I'm just taking a couple of glue dots and adding to the end of my paper mechanism, and I'm going to go ahead and adhere my poinsettia onto that. Now, truth be told, the poinsettia might be just a little bit heavy for this paper mechanism, but it was something I had handy, and it actually still worked. But the lighter weight the decoration you have on the end of the paper mechanism, the better it'll spring out whenever the card is open. But you can see here I still have a nice bounce to the card. Now in order to keep the card closed, you'll want to add a belly band around the center, and I just use another strip of paper and I go ahead and add glue dots and secure that closed. So this should slide over your card, and again this will keep it closed. For this idea, you'll notice I have a little bit of a nail polish change, but that's very unimportant. I will have that throughout this video, just because I have previously recorded a few clips. This tip for the photo corners can be used for cards or actual photo corners. What I do is get a scrap piece of paper and just cut the corners of the paper. Because I know that they're cut straight, it makes it just really easy on me. And so I just use the little corner as a template and cut all 4 corners. So you can just do this with your scissors. There's no need to measure and use a paper trimmer or anything unless you just absolutely want to. But I find it easy enough to achieve with the scissors. And I use the cutter bee scissors. You can use any kind that you choose. I think the cutter bees and the Fiskars are really nice because they're nice, sharp detail scissors. And so once I have those cut out, you can see how I can frame my card, and then whatever I put inside, the photo frame, I guess you could call it, will just be showcased. And so that's just to give you an idea. Now, of course, you would add more than just the 4 corners. That bottom right corner, I think I must have cut a little wonky, but anyway, you'll do a better job cutting yours, I'm sure. And so that's how you can make it look like a really nice showcased sentiment or showcased image for your card. Also, if you want to add a little bit of flair to your photo corners, you can go in with your fine detail scissors and just cut a little line right in the middle, just like you were making a fishtail banner. And then after you do that, cut up to that line. And that'll make a nice little addition to your photo corner, so it's not just a plain, triangle, I guess. It gives it a little bit of something. Again, it can be used on cards or in little mini albums for photos or scrapbook pages, whatever you choose. Now here's an example of a card using the photo corners, and you can see how it just finishes it off and it makes it look really elegant. And I don't know, just something about it really, I thought, added a lot to the card. Here's also a clip of the photo corners used in a mini album. Let's go on to the next idea. Basically, paper piecing is coloring in your image with colored paper rather than markers, colored pencils, or any other medium you may use. So I think of it as coloring with paper. And as you can see here, the image on the left is what I came up with once I had completely paper pieced my image. And here is the completed card. And I also printed this same image on colored sheets of paper. The colored paper is what I will be using for my paper piecing. For example, let's say I want the bottom of her skirt to be blue, so I would simply cut out the portion of the image that I need, cutting along the black lines. Also, I would recommend to use sharp pointed detail scissors for this technique because it just makes things easier. So after I have finished cutting, I will use my glue pen to adhere the blue paper into place, aligning it with the exact part of the image on my white paper. So just to show another example, let's say we want the rose to be pink. Simply cut the rose part of the image from the pink paper, following the black lines to cut. And when fussy cutting, it's better to turn and move the paper around rather than your scissors. It just seems to give more control and a more accurate cut. Once the pink rose is cut out, simply adhere it to the original image with your glue. Continue this process until your image is completely filled in with colored paper. Now for this idea, I will keep it very brief, but you can see here how I've made a mosaic card. And a mosaic, basically I'm calling it that because it's just a bunch of pieces of scrap paper that I've cut up, and I've just coordinated those scraps to go together, and I added a little bit of space in between all of the little mosaic tiles, and that just made it look really artistic and almost like a stained glass look. So here is an idea for you to use with paper scraps to make a little mosaic card. For this idea, I wanted to show you some Christmas cards that I made this year, and these will be going out, of course, in December. And you can see the front of the card, and then on the inside, I've coordinated the little strip at the bottom, the little stripes there, and then there's a little heart cut out. And you see how that just adds to the inside of the card. And so there's one idea. And then on this next card, I did exactly the same, but the only difference on this particular card is that I made a little fishtail banner at the bottom, and I didn't make it go all the way across. And then I just cut out a little snowman out of one of my paper scraps, and I thought that looked really cute there, and it finished off the inside of the card. And then this final card, I did a little bit differently. Instead of adding the inside strip that coordinates with the outside horizontally, I added it vertically. And so I just slanted the bottom of that to give it a little flare. And I think that really adds a lot to the inside of the card and finishes it off. So here are some very basic ideas for ATCs, or artist trading cards. And so I'm just gluing these with my ATG glue runner onto some pieces of scrap paper. And you can see those are just little small pieces of paper. Again, you don't need much for ATCs, and so they make a wonderful idea if you want to use for your scrap papers. If you have really small pieces of paper that you need to use up, a great idea is to use die cuts, or make die cuts out of them, I should say. So using your metal die, you can cut out words, shapes, anything that would embellish your card or your scrapbook page, or even if you're doing like a journal or Bible journaling. There's so many ideas of little cutouts that you can use with your scrap papers. So I know probably a lot of us that make cards or do scrapbooking have paper scraps like this laying around where there's just random cutouts in it. Well, why not make that a stencil? These can be reused over and over again, and so I really like this idea. Now, I'm not going to do just the most excellent job on this card because I'm just kind of showing it as an example. But you can see here how I'm lining up the hot air balloon where I want it on my card. And then I'm going to take just a paper scrap, another one, and just hide that other little hot air balloon there on the corner because I don't want that to be stenciled at this point. I'm going to go in with my blending brush. This is the Blending Buddy from Trinity Stamps. And I'm going to go in and just do these like a silhouette. So I'm going to use black ink. And like I say, I want it to be like a silhouette. So I'm going to make it into a nighttime scene. Now, if I were thinking ahead, I would have probably taped down this stencil with some washi tape or some painter's tape, or used some kind of a stencil spray to hold that in place. But I'm just showing you the basic idea of using these as stencils. So you can see that I'm just using the black ink directly on the card there, and it gives it kind of more of a gray look rather than just straight black. And that makes it kind of nice for silhouettes because it's somewhat see-through. Now I'm pulling that away, I'm like, look, the edges. Grr. So I did kind of go over the edge of that stencil, but you won't do that on yours because you'll be a lot more professional than me. So I'm going to line up the next one. Now, I decided to overlap these a little bit to try to hide that little mess up there, which it does, and everything comes out okay in the end. But I kind of go over the edge again, and so it leaves another little black edge on this one, but whatever. I'm just doing this as an example, so like I say, you won't be as klutzy on yours as I am on this example. So I'm blending away, and at the very end, you can see that when I pull this away, it'll give me a nice little silhouette there as well. So you can overlap like this, and it's kind of transparent enough to where it almost looks like the balloons, when they're lit up, that you can kind of see the one behind the other one. And you'll notice that more when I do this large balloon. So I'm going to speed this part up a little bit simply because you get the idea. So da-da-da, I'm blending, da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, now we've finished, and there's your silhouettes. Now, I did not do, like my best blending job. I should have tapped off the brush and blended. Again, I'm just showing you the idea of where you can kind of see the balloon through the other one. And then I'm going to go in with a little bit of my Paris Dusk ink. This is just a Memento Dewdrop ink. This is a really nice dark blue ink, and it just looks really pretty for a nighttime sky. And again, like I say, I'm not trying to blend seamlessly. I'm just laying in some color. This brush is actually excellent, and it blends like a dream, but I'm just like not even trying here. I'm just laying it straight down and not tapping it off. And so you won't get this, result with yours. You'll do a lot better job. So anyway, I'm just blending away, and then you can see how I can make that into a silhouette sky and then just kind of fade out the edges. So I'm going to finish this out by using my white gel pen, and I'm just going to add some little stars in the sky. I suppose it could be snow, but I don't much think anybody would want to take a hot air balloon ride if it's snowing. So I'm just going to make it like a starry sky, and you can make it as elaborate or, whatever. It's up to you. But this is just to give you an idea of what you can get out of your stencils that you have left over from your paper scraps. Now, if you want to add a little bit more to this card, you can go in with a pen. I'm just using a micron pen here. You can go in and outline these hot air balloons or even color them in darker with like a black marker. But I just wanted to show you how you can make them stand out a little more if you want that one to look like it's more in the foreground, and so on and so forth. So you get the idea, and I hope that this gives you an idea to use stencils with your scraps that you've cut dies out of. Now, a lot of us that are card makers like to add matting or frames behind our card sentiment or the image or whatever. So let's say on this black piece of paper that I'm wanting to have like my main sentiment or an image or something on that. So I want to mat it with this red and white stripe paper, but usually I need a pretty good amount of paper to mat it. So you can see I'm just kind of eyeballing it. Just for the example, I would probably do a more accurate measuring if I were to be using this for real. But I'm just going to cut around this black piece of paper and make me a little mat or a frame to go around it or behind it. And that'll just kind of make it pop and just stand out more and look more finished and give the card a lot of extra. And so I'm just using my paper trimmer and trimming around the edges to get my little frame or matting, if you will. And so once I have this cut out, you can see, that it's going to look fine and everything. But the idea is I'm using quite a bit of paper for this. So if you have a larger paper scrap, this is an idea. You can do it this way. But let's say that I want this same effect, but I don't have that big of a sheet of paper for a paper scrap. Well, this is where this idea comes in. So step one, you can see, yes, it looks fine like that, and that's okay to use if you have a larger mat. But the idea is to make a matting or a frame behind it when you don't have that much paper. So you can see I just have some little strips cut out here, and I'm going to lay this around the black focal point of the card, which, whatever I want to put on the black paper, a sentiment or an image. And so I'm just measuring these to be the length. I'm folding them, and then I'm going to just cut where I folded, and that'll give me the exact length without having to measure. And so once I have all of these cut, you can see how I'm just placing them around to create a frame. So you can get the exact same effect without having to use as much paper. This is also a good idea if you don't want to waste paper. If you're very frugal with your paper, you can just do this to add a matting effect. Okay, so this next idea is for paper beads. You'll need some paper, obviously, and a skewer and some glue. I'm just using a glue stick, which I think you could probably use a little stronger glue. This isn't this isn't really the strongest glue. So you can see that this paper here is just like a thinner paper that actually works a little bit better for the paper beads. But most of us have scraps of cardstock, so that's what I want to make this out of. Now this is just like a lighter weight cardstock, but still cardstock is cardstock. So I'm using the kind of cardstock that has two sides for the color, so that way when the beads are rolled, the inside won't look quite like paper. I will be the first to admit that I'm not a professional paper bead maker, and there are YouTubers out there that are far more talented than I am in this area. But in my layman's view of how to make paper beads, I will show you how to as well. So I'm just taking a ruler and I'm making triangle shapes. And you want them to be really narrow, tall, skinny triangles. And so this is good to use with paper scraps that you have that may be tall and skinny or whatnot. And so I'm just using a pencil there, and I'm just drawing the little triangle shape. I could go in with my scissors and cut that out, but I cannot cut a straight line. So I'm going in with my paper trimmer instead, and I'm going to cut that out and just line that up with the grooves on my Fiskars paper trimmer and trim out a handy dandy little triangle. And yes, the pencil is still on there, and so I'm going to go in with my eraser and just erase that off of there. Now, you only really need to use the pencil for the first template. If you want to just, trace it with your scissors on the next ones, you can. I use the pencil on all of them just because I'm a little bit klutzy on cutting a straight line. So once I have the pencil lines erased, I'm going to just lay that as a template down onto my scrap piece of paper and trace another triangle. Again, these are going to just be tall, skinny triangles that you cut out for your paper beads. So you get the idea of how I've cut out both of these triangles, and I'm going to go in with my little skewer, and I'm going to kind of start curling the paper in the direction that I want it to go. And the reason I'm doing this is so my paper won't have like folds and cracks in it when I go to roll it up. Because if you don't do this, the paper's a little bit too heavyweight and stiff to roll up into the shape you're wanting. So what you want to do is fold your paper over and kind of crease where your first little roll is going to go, and just glue that into place. Now I'm using a glue stick, but to be honest with you, I would probably use a stronger glue if I had to do this over again, and a more fast drying glue. And then I have the skewer there, and I'm going to just roll that onto the skewer and keep that really tight and roll that up until the entire piece of paper is rolled onto the skewer. Now, I keep calling this a skewer. Truth be told, it's actually what we call in the business an orangewood stick. So I used to be in the beauty industry, and I used to be a nail tech, manicures and pedicures. And so I have a ton of these orangewood sticks left over. Now, once you have this all rolled up, it slides off of this little orangewood stick really, really easily because it has a hole in the center, like a donut. Yum, that sounds awesome. Now you can leave it like this, but if you want it to be shiny and you want to seal it, you can use a little bit of clear nail polish, and that'll make it look really like a real wooden bead. And so that's a really neat idea to use your paper scraps for. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you got a lot of ideas. Again, don't forget to check out my other video in the description box where I have even more paper scrap ideas. Also, for more of the stash busting ideas for different supplies that you may have, be sure to see the other creators on this hop. And I want to thank Weekend Craftaholic for hosting this hop. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.